Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome to a very short tutorial that I'm going to do on how to animate within widgets. It's a very simple topic, but without having at least an understanding of how to do it, it's insanely difficult to actually figure it out. So what I simply want to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new interface in a widget blueprint, and I'm just going to call this my test blueprint. Doesn't really matter there. And inside of this, all I really want to do is actually, I'm going to close these windows. This is what a default blueprint will look like when you first open it up. And what I want to do is I'm just going to create a simple text box, and I'm just going to place this like somewhere near the middle. It's not too big of a deal. But then to animate this text box here, what I need to do is I need to open some additional windows. That was the windows that I closed at the bottom. By default, you don't have these windows open. So what you need to do is you need to click Window, and then you need to click Animations, and then you also need to open up your Windows tab, and you need to do Timeline. These two extra windows here give you the ability to animate your widgets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new animation, and I'm going to call this, let's call it fade text. And now inside of this fade text, what I can do is I can then add a track. You can see here that these tracks on this part in the timeline, they link to the animations inside the animation window. So first we make a new animation, and then with that animation selected here, I can then go into the timeline and add a track. The track is, in my opinion, how I see it in my head, it's just what are you actually changing. So with this new track, I want to change and you can see here, I actually don't have a reference to it, I believe. So what I need to do is I need to make this a variable, and I'll call this let's call this our animated text box. And now when I do this add track, you can see here I have animated text box. So now with that, what I now have is I now have a reference inside of this animation to my text box, and then I need to add another track to say what am I actually animating with this text box. Well, what I want to animate, for me, I just want to fade it in and out, so that deals with opacity. So I need to add a track for color and opacity, and now that we have this drop down here, I can open this up and you can see we get our RGB channel for our color, and then we get opacity for our opacity. So if you've never worked with a timeline, it works with keyframes. Whenever you use animations, timelines, or anything, you work with keyframes. So by default, I believe it added a keyframe at marker 0 for us. So at 0 seconds, we have a keyframe already here, and those are the dots. What I can do then is I can drag my timeline over to like 1 second. If I want my animation, let's say, to be 1 full second, I can drag it over to 1 second. Then what I want to do is at the actually, let's just do it for the opacity channel. I just want to animate the opacity, so what I want to do is add a new key at the current frame. If I click that, you can see I get an extra dot on our bottom opacity channel. So that means that we can animate from 0 seconds to 1 seconds based on the values. At 0 seconds, our opacity is set to 1. If I click back on the 1 second, I then can change that value. And if I set it to 0, you can see here, it kind of fades out the alpha. You can see the alpha fading out. The reason being is that at 0 seconds, we have our opacity set to 1. At 1 second, with this new keyframe, I set the opacity to 0. And you can see here, if I hit play, you can see our text box. It starts at full opacity, and it fades just to blank. So that's how we make the animation. And if we wanted to, we could add a bunch of keyframes here. If we wanted to, I could then like add another keyframe at 2 seconds, and then I could set the opacity back to 1. So let's try that. And you can see here, it's going to go from being there to not being there, and then it's back to being full opacity. So I like that. And now what we have is we have an animation called fade text. If I go over to our editing graph, you can see here on the left side, under variables, I have a variable for fade text. So what I'm going to do is on event construct of our widget, what I want to do is I want to play this animation. So simply what I can do is I can drag our fade text inside of here and get our reference to our animation, and I can just type play animation, and that gives us our control. So at the construction of this widget, we will play this animation, and if you want to, you can see you have a bunch of controls here. You can change the starting time, you can have it loop, we can have it go backwards or ping pong. I've never actually used that. And then there's play speed. So let's try this out. I'm actually going to set the play speed to be half, so that instead of our animation being 2 seconds, it's 4 seconds, so that we can see it a bit better. And then I just simply need to add this widget to our viewport, so I'm just going to real quick add it to event begin play of our level, just so I can visualize our widget. So I just need to create our widget. We called it our test blueprint, and then I'm just going to add that to the viewport. And now, at the start of the level, we're adding the widget to our screen, and that when we construct our widget, we are then playing our animation at half speed. So let's try that out. So we see our text fades, and then it fades back. So that's how you do animation, guys, at least within widgets. And you have a bunch of controls. If we hit this track button one more time under our text box, you can see we can change its visibility, we can change its transform. So with transform, if I added this, I could quickly go back to frame 0, add a keyframe for the translation, and I could go to 2 seconds, and I could add another keyframe for the translation. Is it adding it? I think it added it. Let's see, where are you? There we are. And then at 2 seconds, what I can then do is change that value. If I drop that translation down, I can change that value at 1 second to be like 200x. And when we play this now, you can see how it animates to the right. So that's just how you do animations. And once again, you're adding in, and then if I wanted to make a new animation, let's say, I wanted something totally separate here. Like, let's delete this transform track. What if I wanted that to be in a different animation? I could call it like move text. And now with move text selected, you can see here it has a fresh track. So what I could then do is I could redo kind of the animated text box, do the transform here, and that I could play them individually, because you can see now I have in reference to a move text animation. So very simply, that's how you animate within widgets. I don't think there's a better way to do it. If you want more control over your interpolations here, what you can do is you can show the graph here. And I'm not going to get into this too much, but this is how you animate the curves if you wanted to. It's a little wonky. I'm not sure how to get that to fit appropriately. I'm not really seeing it. Oh, that's why I didn't have it selected. So you can see here, this is the curve of our 0 to 1 and back to 0. If we wanted to, we could change these. I could make it be linear so that instead of it being a curve, that we go straight 0 to 1 smoothly, and that we could auto it, and that we could have this, let's see, is it going to give us, there we go. Now I could, or we need that both to be auto, there we go. And now what I could do is then I could animate this so that if we played it, I think we would get some really wonky, yeah, it's just, you can see here that these are just the values of the opacity over time. And that's how you edit the curves, is simply by opening the curve editor right there. So that's how you do that. But that's animations. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope that was helpful.